Good evening to most of you. Good morning for some. But thank you all for attending, and I'm really excited to be able to present to you all today. Product marketing is something that's near and dear to my heart, so hope to share with you some fundamentals, building blocks, maybe give you some ideas, not only for your product marketing endeavors, but perhaps how to sell and frame product marketing in your company. I have over the course of my career run into lots of different versions of product marketing. There's been, common denominators, but it varies widely from company to company. I'll talk about some of that as I go through this today, and try to get to a higher order at the end. And so I'll save that for you all. Menika gave a great introduction of what we're going to go through today. So I'll spend just a couple minutes on what is product marketing, and then we'll get into each of the 5 reasons to invest and hopefully invest more in your product marketing function, leading into a quick summary and then ultimately a Q&A session. So I hope you guys can throw some good questions at me here, because that always makes it more fun. Menika did a great job of going through my background. Yeah, that nearly 30 years really sounds like, it makes me sound old, which I guess I am at this point, but I've spent a lot of years, in fact, all my career has been spent on the software manufacturing side, so software vendors, or ISVs as we call them. So I've worked for a variety of software companies, all in and around developing, launching, selling, supporting commercial software products. So I do have that slant to me. I'll try to make this a little more generic to make sure it appeals to everyone on the call today. I believe an old friend of mine from Colorado School of Mines is on the call, representing an oil and gas industry. So I'll try to make sure I have some things that that everyone can take away from this. Currently, I'm being presented with a poll here, so let me just answer that. Okay. So over my career, I've launched dozens. I think it's probably over 100 new products in different markets. So spanning database, security management, so IT security, data analytics, even automated testing and application performance monitoring. So commercial products in all those different segments. One thing that hopefully makes me uniquely qualified to talk to you all today about this subject is that I've worked from the bottom up as both a product manager and a product marketing manager multiple times in my career. So I have held those roles and positions and owned those deliverables, and many of which we'll talk about today. In the last 10 plus years, I've led teams of product managers in product marketing. So familiar space for me, having worked kind of up through those ranks in understanding the different audiences and deliverables across multiple small, some medium, and a couple very large companies of all funding flavors. So public companies, venture capital, private equity, and they all have slightly different dynamics based on their stage and life cycle. Currently, I'm an independent advisor helping companies and investors on go-to-market strategies, product strategies, and anything and everything related to product marketing and product management. So with that, I'll jump into, if it cooperates, into the next slide here. So what is product marketing? And in fact, I think the Institute of Product Leadership has a multi-day course on product marketing, and I highly encourage you all to take a look at that because there's a lot more to it than just this simple slide. Fundamentally, though, product marketing is about bringing a new product to market, and I would add that you want to bring it to market successfully. So it's not just about pushing it out, so to speak. It's about giving it a proper launch and lift in life into the market and into the hands of your customers. Traditionally, product marketing in the world of kind of our business is called outbound marketing, contrasted with product management's inbound marketing. And what outbound marketing really means is all the different facets and dimensions you see on the right. So it typically starts with positioning and messaging. So where does your product fit and What does it do? Like is, does, means is one way to think about it. What is it? What does it do? What does that mean to a customer, to a buyer, to a user? That is really the bedrock of product marketing. From that, then different types of content get created. Some of that content is customer facing. Think your website, think data sheets, collateral, events. Could be email content. It could also be premium content that's being used to fuel a marketing program. So in the case of lead generation, there could be a white paper, could be a video, ultimately leading to an in-person event or a call with an expert. Sales training is one of the biggest areas, and sometimes it's overlooked. If you're in a very small company, the sales training and sales enablement is another term for it. Those needs can be pretty easy to address when you're in a small company with fewer than 10 sales reps. But as a company scales and is in a growth mode, when you're adding, let's say, 50 plus new sales reps a year, training becomes one of the most important things that a product marketing team and a product marketing manager can do and be part of, and the time spent there should be significant. Pricing packaging is another area, and that even gets into kind of granular management of SKUs, different price books per region. It can get complex for a global company. Evangelism is one area. That's where you're actually taking your positioning, messaging, and content, and now you're telling the story to a variety of audiences externally. It could be in a webinar medium like this. It could be in front of partners in a small event with 40, 50 people. It could be at a large trade show. So evangelism takes different shapes and forms. And then finally, GTM, which is go to market. And I'll talk more about that as we dig into this today. So a little bit of background, where do product marketers come from? And hopefully the build will work with this software here. This is an age-old question. So where do good product marketers come from? Do they need a technical background? Do they need an MBA? Should they come from sales or pre-sales? Should they come from product management or some other background? So my experiences, and I'll speak from my lens, is that it's not one of these. I've seen good PMMs come from each one of these areas. My personal belief is that it's an amalgam. The best PMMs I've worked with and managed are an amalgam of technical, so product, market, and business chops or acumen skills. So it's really a combination. And what is the right blend? Because that's a pretty simple equation. It really depends on the nature of your product, your market, what your goals are, and what you're trying to accomplish. I've seen people with very light technical backgrounds come in, but a strong MBA, from a strong MBA program, and do very well. I've seen pre-sales engineers come in and convert to product marketing and do very well. And I've seen many product managers decide that they wanted to go from that inbound to the outbound and convert into product marketing and do a great job. So my background was technical. I started as a product developer way back when at IBM, and I was paid to write code, which these days is kind of a scary thought. But I was a professional developer, and then worked my way into product management and ultimately product marketing, and then have spent the last decade or so managing either one of those functions or both together. Product marketing and product management go nicely together in many companies, and so that's often been my purview. So I come at it from a technical bias, but that's just one way of doing it. And I've had to learn the marketing, really the market and business side of things along the way. So there's no one right answer here is really the message. Where does product marketing sit? At the highest level, okay, at the highest level, I think of product marketing as living in the middle of all three. So really at the confluence of product, and that's the product development function, and typically product management is part of that organization, sales and marketing. So it's really right in the middle of all three of those major functions in those constituents, which makes it special and in many cases kind of hard to manage because, as you know, with personas and the different types of people in product, they're very different from salespeople, very different from marketing people. So you have to be able to, you have to have the right skill set, which leads me into the next slide here. Hang on, it's stuck again. So what makes a great PMM? What are those characteristics and skills that you need? So one, articulate. You have to be able to articulate things. It's very helpful in this role, I would say required, to be able to convey the message. And we'll talk more about story as well, but articulating the story in a meaningful way. Two is collaborative. Given that confluence picture, you are in a role where you're trying to satisfy sales, satisfy product management and product development, and satisfy the rest of marketing, because the rest of marketing is going to look to product marketing to help them guide their efforts, especially from a content perspective, and even how to reach the right audience at the right time with the right message. The other part of collaborative is a product marketing manager. Even though you have that manager at the end of your title, most PMMs do not have direct reports until they get up into a management level. So what that means is they have to get a lot done in a matrix fashion. So they're leading a cross-functional team without direct line authority. And so you have to be able to collaborate well. You have to be able to articulate the plan along with the details and including some ideas. And so it really is a challenging role from that aspect. But within that challenge, there's a lot of fun to be had. Creativity helps, right? It's hard to define, what that means, but a creative lens through all this is helpful and can lead to some great breakthroughs in how you bring your product to market, new programs, campaigns. A lot of it will fall back on that messaging and positioning work that's done as the foundational bedrock. So creativity does help. Analytical. This is something that I told you a minute ago, you don't have to be technical, but it helps to have an analytical bent. Especially these days, there's a lot more focus on KPIs and metrics and dashboards, which usually are aligned with corporate goals, down into departmental goals, down into product line goals. And so you have to be able to frame up really KPIs and metrics that illustrate and reinforce the work you're doing and show that there's progress, right? So that's where the analytical side will come in. So most PMMs these days have that side of them too. A growth mindset. So this is a term one of my bosses used a lot, and I've latched on to it. So what growth mindset really means, and I'll summarize here, it's the belief that you can get smarter and that by learning more and working harder, that you will then reach a higher level of achievement and gain better results. So it's being optimistic that you can learn, get smarter, and put in the time and effort, and that time and effort and harder work will get you to a higher level of achievement. So it's more of it is a mindset, right? It starts with how you think about things and being optimistic and striving to learn more. And that's critical in this role because no one knows everything, and discovering and learning from your blind spots is integral in being successful as a product marketing manager. And then finally, storyteller. You have to be able to not just write down the messaging and get the key benefits and value prop out. You have to be able to really weave that into a story that makes it interesting so that someone will listen to you. And hopefully in that story, you're not only talking about problems that they may have, but you're weaving in your capabilities and then ultimately paying that off with the benefits to the customer or the prospect. So we started with this little Q&A or true or false question. So product marketing, and I found this somewhere on the internet recently. I was doing some research into just definitions of product marketing, and I saw there was a claim or a statement that said this: product marketing is focused on marketing to existing customers more than prospective customers. So how can I see the poll results? Can I just click on, let me see, yep, that worked. So, okay, so 11% said true and 92% said false, okay? So my answer for this is false. Now, why I said false is product marketing is generally focused on acquisition of net new customers while also focused on existing. So you don't choose one and not do the other. You are doing both. But to say that product marketing is focused on existing customers more than prospects is absolutely false. In many companies I've been in, we've spent 80 to 90% of our energy, our budget, our work on net new customers and acquisition, and how helping sales and the company, the rest of marketing as well, acquire more customers. So what does change is the ratio. The ratio will vary by business, by product line, by company goals. So you don't have to be biased towards net new customer acquisition, but there will be a component of that guaranteed. You may be a 50-50 ratio with a legacy product line or an old product in a very established business. You may put more focus on existing customers and trying to focus on expansion of that footprint there instead of acquisition of new customers in certain cases. So it depends, but I've never seen a product marketing function that's not focused on net new customer acquisition. So with that, we'll bridge into 5 reasons to invest in product marketing. Let me take a quick time check. We're about halfway through here. So I'll start the countdown from 5 and work our way to 1. I started with accelerating your new product or service launch as number 5, because this is typically the most well-known task or deliverable of product marketing. It's the launch or the launch plan that drives the launch. So this is something that absolutely critical, right? If you've gone to the trouble of identifying, building, and now ready to release a new product or service, you absolutely need to give it attention and get it into the market so that it can accelerate and hopefully attract new customers. But it's not something that I would say this is something that every product marketing function I've worked for has done. Now, the degree to which they've done it, meaning not so good, good, or great, that varies widely. And so I think most companies I've been in, we try to establish a launch plan that is reasonable and realistic for what we have, and then make that better every release. So if you're on a quarterly release cadence, strive for kind of that crawl, walk, run, and get better every time. So that's a good way to think about it. The treatment of the launch itself varies by launch type. Most companies have a way of designating tier or importance of launch. So A, B, C is a common way to do it. A being the highest priority launch, where you throw everything at it you can do. That includes marketing, additional campaigns, marketing programs. It includes a heavier PR, so your public relations, more analyst activity with AR. So just the whole kitchen sink, essentially, in an A tier launch or a tier A launch. C launch would be something that's more of a minor release treatment, where you go through and update the collateral, the sales tools. You communicate it internally, but you don't spend a lot of energy externally. And then a B being somewhere in between. So as your company matures and your release processes mature, you'll probably end up with some sort of tiering in order to designate the treatment, which really translates to how much energy, including time and cost, are you going to put into that. New releases, so new releases of existing products tend to be focused on revisions and improvements to existing content. So you already have a foundation there. You have product collateral, you have messaging on your website, you have assets and content that are used to promote the product. You have sales tools, a whole library full of those. So the function is generally going to be more focused on revisions to include the new stuff and what's new. But I would submit that, along the way, that these can also be, these new releases for existing products can also be a good time to innovate. You can, in my last company, we developed something called a BAI, a before after impact, for new capabilities that were being released. And this was an internal sales tool, but it was a nice way to really be very specific and granular about new capabilities that were being released, what we did before, what we're doing now, essentially the new capability, or think of it as new features, and then the impact that that has to our customers. So that's the benefit part. And it was essentially one slide per capability, but it was a nice template, a nice way to convey the what's new in a very practical fashion that helped our sales teams really get to the essence of the new release and be able to communicate that to not only their existing customers, but to prospects when prospects were asking about what's new in your version 5 release that just came out. So ultimately the goal here, and hopefully I didn't steal a thunder, is to drive awareness and demand for the new product to accelerate its entry into the market. And that includes its related customer traction, which translates to dollars or product bookings. So it's not so much a launch date that you're after. There's a lot of celebrations of launch dates, which definitely want to applaud the work that's been done, but that's not the end. That's just the beginning. And a lot of marketing knows that this is a continuum, and the launch is a great milestone, but it's the beginning of that momentum. So number 4, articulate your story. So as we talked about, product marketing is responsible for defining and articulating the positioning and messaging for your product. There's many different ways to do that. I've seen from a formatting or template view, I've seen things called message maps, which are used to help define and articulate the positioning and messaging, really getting to the is, does, and means, and reinforcing customer use cases and examples. I've seen something called what we call messaging cakes, which is basically it's like a taxonomy or a hierarchy of the value proposition that goes from very high level, almost tagline, down into usually 3 pillars. So there's different ways to do this. The template isn't the important part. It can be helpful, but it's really the time and effort you put into it. And this is the time where you should be debating words. I mean, brevity wins in this game of messaging and positioning. And while to some of you, if you come from a technical background, debating the right word, whether it be a verb or adjective to use, may seem like it's a waste of time, but I'll tell you from experience that choosing the right word and really going through those iterations, especially internally, and ideally with a cross-functional team, so not just your product marketing team, but getting other stakeholders as well, because you need those different perspectives to find the right ways to message your product, your solution, your service. And don't forget that the messaging needs to match up and be synchronized with the target persona. In most companies, for example, I'm working with a company right now that has the user, the most granular buyer, if you will, but they're the lowest level, they're a tester, then working your way up to the director of that test group, and then up to the VP or CIO, which along the way, they have very different concerns and characteristics. So understanding those personas is the first part, and then making sure your messaging maps to what those people care about, so that you're talking to them in terms and using words and phrases that will resonate with them. So that's an important part of this process. The next part of this is differentiation. Sounds basic and pretty elementary, but just from the time I've spent, and I'm sure you've all seen this to some degree as well, is that there's a lot of messages out there that seem very similar. Like a vendor in, let's say, the security space doing password management, if you read their messages and really their value props, it's hard to tell the difference, because they aren't focused on really answering that how will you win question. One framework that I found useful is from a company called Corporate Visions. They train and teach around this methodology of why change. And this is, think of this from a vendor perspective or a company perspective to your potential customer, is why change, question mark, why now, question mark, and why us, question mark. So if you can answer those questions, then you're probably getting into the meat of differentiation there and really answering that how will you win question. So spend that time. And you have to understand the market and competitive landscape in order to do this work. So when I hear that product marketing doesn't, quote, own competitive, kind of competitive intelligence, that may be true to some extent, but you have to, as a product marketing team and product marketing manager, have to understand the competitive landscape and really be able to frame and build out a schema of what's going on in your space, who's good at what, and kind of their different angles and lenses into it. Otherwise, you won't end up with a differentiated message that resonates. So the goal, communicate the value of your product solution to prospective buyers in a meaningful and impactful way, and brevity does win in my book. Number 3, enable your sales teams. So this is the sales enablement function. Product marketing is responsible for training sales and pre-sales, and sometimes channel sales. So sometimes partners are part of the scope too. I've had that multiple times in my career. And in many cases, you can leverage the same core content. You just have to reframe a few things for partners given the differences there. But sales enablement, partner enablement, a big part of the role. Launch training is not enough. So if all you're doing for sales training right now is just training them on the new release, that's a good start. But I'd really encourage you to strive to offer more dimensions of training. So for example, think about non-recurring versus recurring. Non-recurring is sort of the one time, by definition, the one time, or very infrequent in the case of kickoff training. But think of new hire training as a great example of non-recurring. It happens when you're a new hire. 5 years later, that new hire training, most of it's lost or out of date. So it was helpful at the time, but it's no longer helpful. Launch training, I put in that category, is that it happens once for a particular release and then it's done. Recurring training is where I see the most bang for the buck and the benefit. And this is harder to pull off. I've done it now, my last 3 or 4 companies. I've established a bi-weekly cadence on Friday mornings, usually first thing in the morning, so that EMEA could join. And the feedback when I get started has always been the same. It's not going to work. Fridays, people are traveling back. They may be recovering from a trip. Who knows? They may be golfing, whatever. But it's not going to work. People won't tune in on a every other week basis. So it generally has to start with a bit of a forcing function from the VP of sales to get people on it. And then what I've done is promise that I'll keep it light. I'll keep it topical. We'll rotate content and topics and speakers, keep it very relevant. We try to hit 3 to 5 different topics and give each topic no more than 5 minutes. So I found that if you do that through a cadence and establishing that every other week cadence, and then following through on the promise of good content that makes sense and is helpful, that then you get to a point where the salespeople actually want to attend. And even when the recording isn't out there 2 hours later, they're asking and pinging for it. So in my experiences, the recurring training becomes the most important way to keep salespeople in the know, current, topical, and effective. So that's, and again, it comes down to that content and managing the topics and speakers there. But it's magic when it happens, but it doesn't require magic to pull it off. It just takes a little bit of time and effort. Multiple types of deliverables in sales training or sales enablement. So these are things that are used, terms for deliverables that I've built out in the past. My teams have built out enablement decks, whiteboards, sales cards, competitive battle cards, persona cards. They all fall in this category. So the goal here is to create a library of sales tools combined with multiple training mediums to enable sales to tell your story in a consistent, repeatable, and scalable way. So as the sales team scales, as your business scales, that this continues to pay off. So number 2, evangelize your story and solution. This is where you leverage a lot of the work you've done. So if you've built out the right story, you've got some strong positioning and messaging to work off, you should then be able to tell that story comfortably and convincingly in front of different types of internal audiences as well as external audiences. So lots of different flavors of venues. Typically, you want to be focusing when you're telling the story on capabilities and impact, not features. And it's not a product pitch. It's really about solving customer issues and weaving in how your existing customers are using your product, your service, your solution. That usually makes for an even better story, okay? So the goal here is to leverage that work you've done, weave in customer use cases, testimonials, paint the vision, and pay it off with your capabilities, and don't forget to include the customer evidence. And this is number 1, and the last one I'll get to before I take questions, is this is the higher order I was talking about at the beginning. So all those things we've talked about up to this point really comprise part of your go-to-market execution and go-to-market plan, but I haven't talked about developing a go-to-market plan. So in the higher order versions of product marketing that I've been part of and managed, this is where you want to get to, is you want to get to the point where your product marketing team is defining, owning, and helping with the execution, drive the execution of the go-to-market plan. And the go-to-market plan is something that is broader in scope. It's not a launch plan. It does have releases in there as part of a roadmap, but it really steps back up to what are the corporate goals? What are you trying to do as a business? What are those objectives and metrics and that alignment? So a go-to-market plan is the perfect vehicle for aligning with your corporate goals and then tying off with product marketing and sales. So it's a great vehicle for that alignment on the what and the why. And it's what gets you in the middle. It reinforces your position in that confluence with sales, product, and marketing. So it should be, you should develop this with sales leads, product leads, and even marketing leads. I left that out here because it's kind of implicit, but generally the go-to-market plan cannot be developed in a vacuum. It has to be developed collaboratively, and it needs to be aligned with the corporate goals. So this is a great way to put product marketing in a leadership position and role internally, is if you're driving the go-to-market plan, then it gives you the perfect excuse, if you will, to go talk to sales leads, talk to product leads, and talk to the marketing leads, and triangulate that into a sensible plan that aligns with the company goals. And there's different frameworks used for corporate goals and alignment. Plan on a page is one of them. It's a pretty good vehicle, but it still requires you to take that plan on a page and decipher it down into a go-to-market plan. And when you need a go-to-market plan when you're dealing with new products, maybe you're going into a new market, new region, you have new sales motions, maybe you're going to go through channel instead of through direct. So go-to-market plans are what really explain the what, why, and the how gets into the execution, which you lean on then multiple teams cross-functionally to help you with. So the go-to-market plan will contain way more than what you can do in product marketing and way more than what you can do in marketing. It really does cross over all the different pillars. So the product marketing team can be elevated, and this is when you get to a higher order, to think of it as like a sub or mini CMO for his or her product line. And at that point, then you're steering the rest of marketing based on the goals and KPIs contained in the go-to-market plan. And so it really serves as a great blueprint for driving and navigating what you're going to do. And And so that way, then the marketing activities, the marketing programs, the events you do in the field, the trade shows you choose to go to, the amount of paid search and paid advertising you choose to do, it should stem from the go-to-market plan. And you should think of the go-to-market plan as something that can be used to align on that and break out those percentages and ratios of spend and energy so that you can steer the rest of marketing and the go-to-market activities that result. So with that, in summary, product marketing should not be a discretionary role in your company. It is a must-have. Product marketing can and will add value for more than just product launches. Hopefully you got that from today's talk. Product marketing should be aligned with sales and product on the go-to-market. And then finally, product marketing is the perfect spot to align and drive the rest of your marketing activities. So marketing will look to product marketing to help steer the ship and navigate, and that's the way it should be. And use that go-to-market plan as your opportunity and really your vehicle for driving the rest of those marketing activities. So if you do all that, you will see an increase in net new customer acquisition. You'll have a better story, and you should be able, multiple people in the company should be able to tell that story. You should have more alignment given the go-to-market plan. You should be able to get better traction and more quickly with your new product launches and new product releases. And you should have a framework and think about how you're communicating metrics and KPIs. So, you know, you do have to reinforce the value of what you're doing. And so pick metrics and KPIs that illustrate how you're affecting and positively affecting the business. So with that, I'll stop here and go look for some questions. So it looks like, let me go to, and at this point, let me, I'll stop the share. Is that okay?
Sure.
Danica? Yeah, you can put up your screen, and that way, because I've got just a single monitor today, so I can look through some of the questions here. But sure. Wow, you guys are awesome. So there's 17 questions out here. So let me kind of start at the top. So is the sales training, are you okay if I just read them off and go through them?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So one question is the sales training responsibility of product marketing manager or product manager? The short answer here is that generally the way I bifurcate this and have done it is product marketing manager is responsible for training salespeople. The product manager is responsible for training more technical, so people. So that could include solution architects. Product management is typically training solution architects, most of the time training pre-sales, consultants, as well as customer support, I've found. So generally speaking, the product marketing manager is training salespeople, non-SEs. How PM approaches differ for different commercial transaction systems, B2B and B2C. So how PM, so this is about product management, I believe, with PM. I think just answering the question from a product marketing lens, B2B and B2C, there's going to be different tactics involved in reaching your target audience. But the foundational work we've talked about here, minus sales enablement, if you're going, you know, B2C, it depends on how you're reaching the customer. You may have less of a sales enablement, sales training need. But the basics is around messaging, around articulating a story, building a strong value proposition, even a go-to-market from an operational sense is very similar. The tactics that you may employ at a advertising level may be different, and your messaging may need to be more granular to reach a consumer versus a business, right? So there will be some differences, but foundationally it's very similar. Can you please show the previous two slides? Sorry, I missed that. So we'll send out, I'm assuming the deck will be available after the call. So hopefully you can go through and pull that down.
Yes, so we will share this recording with everyone.
Okay, perfect. So next question is, which is demanded from new age PMMs? Launch plan for innovation or to better the existing product? I'm trying to parse that to make sure I understand what that means. I may have to come back to that. I think the question may be around more about driving the requirement set. That's more of a product management function, is determining whether your product, what dose of like new features and innovations required versus catering to existing customer requirements. And that is a balancing act from a product management perspective. So I can't give you a concrete answer. It does depend on what you're trying to do. Generally, it is a balance that you'll have to agree on internally. Let me find another good question. Would like to know more about the bottom-up marketing. I used the bottom-up term meaning entry level earlier in my pitch. Maybe that was what was a bit confusing. I just meant as a product marketing manager or product manager hands-on, owning a particular product is what I meant. So I'm not sure, I may have confused someone with that term. Let me see here. Next question. How is product marketing different from digital marketing? Okay, good question. So product marketing covers the different aspects we talked about today. Digital marketing is a way to communicate those messages out into the market so that it hits your target audience. So digital marketing, if you're looking at a function called digital marketing inside of a company, that would often include the team that owns the website, the team doing paid search or search marketing, both organic and paid, email marketing being a big part of that. So those are all tactics and ways to amplify the signal, if you will, or the message, and hopefully reach your target audience. So they're product marketing in many ways. You could think of this as being more upstream from digital marketing, but digital marketing being a downstream component that's needed to execute on the product marketing plan and the go-to-market plans. Let me look here. What kind of feedback should a product marketing manager collect from outside to share with stakeholders inside? Okay, good question. And there's different, I've seen product marketing roles and been part of product marketing roles where we're very engaged with the customers. That doesn't always happen. Product management, depending on how it's set up, can think that that's often their job, but it really helps to have it come from more than one place, meaning that product marketing should be talking to customers, whether it be in an event or even a customer call. Same with partners. So collecting feedback from customers, prospective customers, partners, other vendors. So doing some research on competitors and being able to feed that back in, that's important. In my conversations with press, so think media and PR, as well as analysts, especially analysts, like IDC, Gartner, Forrester, for example, I've always learned something, usually many things, from a conversation like that, and I'm able to bring that back to the company. So there's lots of different places and people that you can get this information from, even an event like a trade show that is where you go for awareness and maybe some lead gen. There's a lot to be learned from trade shows. Just in you're going to have dozens and dozens of interactions over the course of a few days, and there's a lot of things that can be brought back to the organization from that. So definitely, the more information you can bring back and feed into the system, the more that's going to be appreciated and elevate your role. How does the product marketing team influence product roadmap? Really good one. I've seen this vary widely. Some cases where product marketing has no influence over product roadmap. Personally, I don't think that is right because of all the inputs we just talked about. There's a lot that a product marketing manager and team can contribute to a product roadmap But organizationally, there can be some challenges. I've worked in some companies where the product roadmap was the sacred territory of only product management, and it was hard to break in. And so that's, you may run into that, and it may take some time to get to a point of where you can influence. But in the better organizations I've been in, the product marketing team is part of that influence and has a close relationship with product management. And the product managers are asking product marketing for their input. So that's where you want to get to. Maybe one or two more questions here.
Sure.
Let me just through. Okay, so yeah, so I have a question here. So some of these I'm definitely going to follow up on because they're maybe a little bit more complicated. With all the, here's one, with all the product launches, sales training, partner trainings, a PMM always acts behind the curtain and never takes the limelight. A customer never sees a PMM. What motivates a PMM to keep going? So that's a really good question. So yeah, there is a lot of internal work, if you will, about that sales training, the launches, the partner training. There are ways. I mean, one way is to take some of what you know, maybe take a subset of your customer story or a success or something you think you're doing very well operationally, and build an abstract and submit it to a conference. There are lots of marketing conferences out there. That's one way to kind of elevate your story. There's something out here in Denver called the Denver Startup Week, and I've submitted abstracts in the past. Find something there that you think is unique and elevate that. I'd also say that getting out in front of partners themselves, like out on the road, is a good opportunity. Being visible at trade shows and even submitting abstracts at some of the trade shows you go to. And that go-to-market plan internally, that will elevate the role of what you're doing. And then find metrics. I found it useful to find metrics that map to what your company cares about, like think CEO, COO, CFO, and find a way to capture and reflect some of the work you're doing in metrics that resonate, and then use that as a springboard to share internally and elevate what you're doing, because it'll make you feel better if you know you're helping the company. A question here from Mr. Baker on optimizing product features and services with the customers and challenges in the marketplace. So kind of niche services in oil and gas that don't fully address a customer issue, and then leveraging a technical person in a marketing role. This is something Andy or Mr. Baker, I'll follow up with you on, but it's, yeah, if depending on the person's background, it may be harder to pull that off. I think there's some things I would recommend, some training for anybody that is new to a product marketing role or product management role, to get some outside training on what constitutes that, because there's some things that will really help that person expand and get better at what they do. And maybe even kind of partnering up with a mentor or coach is part of that. But there's some third-party training, including Institute of Product Leadership, that offers classes there that could even just be a one-day thing to get them accelerated in the right direction. But yeah, probably have to spend a little bit more time with you, and happy to do that after the call or later this week. So with that, I think we've got a few more questions here, but some of these they're kind of redundant with some of the other ones I've already covered. So I think that's probably pretty good to close today. And I will welcome any of you. If I didn't get to a question that you have, please follow up with me. I have my email address. It's just greg.davoll@gmail.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Happy to get back to you with any questions you may have. And hopefully this was helpful, and there's at least something you took away from it today. So my pleasure.